It was 1957, and Hollywood was about to witness one of the most unexpected transformations in film history. But nobody knew it yet. All they knew was that someone had made what seemed like a terrible casting decision, and Marlon Brando was not happy about it. The film was The Young Lions, a serious World War II drama based on Irwin Shaw's acclaimed novel. The story followed 3 soldiers, 2 Americans and 1 German, through the brutality and moral complexity of war. This wasn't a light-hearted war adventure. This was heavy, emotional, dramatic material that required actors who could handle moral ambiguity, psychological depth, and raw human suffering. The director, Edward Dmytryk, had already secured 2 of the finest dramatic actors in Hollywood. Marlon Brando, fresh off his Oscar-winning performance in On the Waterfront, would play the German officer. Montgomery Clift, one of the pioneers of method acting and star of A Place in the Sun, would play one of the American soldiers. These were serious actors, method actors, the kind of performers who lived in their characters, who studied motivation and psychology, who approached acting as an art form requiring total commitment. And then the studio cast Dean Martin as the 3rd lead. Dean Martin, the guy who sang That's Amore, the guy who'd spent the last decade making people laugh alongside Jerry Lewis in silly comedies, the guy who made it look effortless because he never seemed to take anything seriously, least of all himself? Hollywood was confused. Variety ran a headline that asked the question everyone was thinking: can a crooner handle drama? The skepticism wasn't mean-spirited, it was just realistic. Dean Martin had never done a serious dramatic role. His entire career had been built on charm, ease, and making everything look simple. He was smooth, cool, funny. But could he act? Could he access the kind of raw emotion that a film like The Young Lions would demand? Marlon Brando didn't think so. Brando, at 33, was already considered the greatest actor of his generation. His performance in A Streetcar Named Desire had revolutionized film acting. His Stanley Kowalski had been dangerous, sexual, animalistic in a way that audiences had never seen before. Then came On the Waterfront, where his Terry Malloy became one of cinema's most iconic characters. I could have been a contender wasn't just a line, it was a cultural touchstone. Brando took his craft seriously. He studied with Stella Adler. He believed in the Stanislavski method. He immersed himself completely in his roles. And he had very little patience for actors who didn't share his commitment. So, when he heard that Dean Martin had been cast, Brando went to Edward Dmytryk with his concerns. "Dean Martin," Brando said, not bothering to hide his skepticism. "The nightclub singer?" Dmytryk, a respected director who'd helmed serious films like Crossfire, tried to explain the studio's reasoning. Dean Martin was a bankable star. His name would help sell tickets. And besides, his character, a Broadway entertainer who becomes a soldier, wasn't that far from who Dean actually was. Brando wasn't convinced. "Edward, this is a serious film. We're making something important here. Put Dean Martin next to real actors like Monty and me, and he's going to look like a pretty boy pretender. The guy's never done anything but comedy and sing songs. He doesn't have the training. He doesn't have the technique." Dmytryk listened, but held firm. The casting was final. Dean Martin was in. Brando shook his head. This is a mistake, and when critics see this, they're going to destroy him. Probably destroy the whole film.
That conversation, meant to be private, leaked, as conversations in Hollywood always do. Within days, it was industry gossip. Marlon Brando thought Dean Martin was going to ruin The Young Lions. The greatest actor in America had essentially called Dean Martin a fraud. When Dean heard about it, and he did hear about it, his response surprised everyone. He didn't fire back, he didn't defend himself in the press, he didn't make angry phone calls or demand apologies. He just showed up to work prepared. What nobody knew, not Brando, not Dmytryk, not the Hollywood gossips, was that Dean Martin had been preparing for a moment like this his entire life. Dean had grown up poor in Steubenville, Ohio, the son of Italian immigrants. He'd dropped out of school in 10th grade. He'd been a boxer, a card dealer, a bootlegger. He'd fought his way up from nothing, reinventing himself at every turn. Dino Crocetti became Dean Martin. The street kid became a star. And he'd done it by being underestimated. When he partnered with Jerry Lewis, everyone said the act wouldn't last. They were too different. Dean was too smooth, Jerry too manic, but they became the biggest comedy team in America. When they broke up in 1956, everyone said Dean's career was over. Jerry was the funny one, the genius. Dean was just the straight man. But Dean's solo career had taken off immediately. Now Hollywood was betting against him again, and Dean knew exactly what he had to do. Let his work speak for itself. On the first day of shooting, Dean arrived on set at 5:30 a.m., 2 hours before call time. He'd already memorized not just his lines, but everyone else's lines too. He'd studied his character's background, motivations, psychological journey. He'd read everything he could about World War II, about soldiers, about the Broadway theater world his character came from. Montgomery Clift, arriving early himself, found Dean in the makeup chair reading through the script one more time. "You're taking this seriously," Clift said. It wasn't a question. Dean looked up and smiled that famous smile, but his eyes were different, focused, determined. "Monty, I've been told I can't act my whole life. First it was he's just a singer, then it was he's just Jerry Lewis's straight man. Now it's just a pretty boy. I'm tired of being just anything. So yeah, I'm taking this seriously." Clift nodded with respect. "Good, we need you to." When Brando arrived on set that first day, he was professional but distant with Dean. They shook hands, exchanged pleasantries, but Brando's skepticism was clear in his body language. He was polite, but he wasn't expecting much. Then they started shooting. Dean's first major scene was a confrontation with another soldier, where his character, a charming, somewhat superficial entertainer named Michael Whitehacker, has to face the reality of war for the first time. The scene required Dean to go from cocky confidence to genuine fear to quiet desperation, all in about 3 minutes. Dmytryk called action, and Dean Martin disappeared. In his place was Michael Whitehacker, vulnerable, scared, trying desperately to hold on to his sense of self as everything around him fell apart. The performance was subtle, nuanced, heartbreaking. Dean's voice cracked in exactly the right places. His eyes showed things his character couldn't say out loud. When Dmytryk called cut, the set was quiet. Brando, who'd been watching from the side, wasn't talking to anyone. He was just staring at Dean with an expression nobody could quite read. They shot the scene 3 more times, from different angles. Dean was perfect every time, finding new layers in the character with each take.
Arnold stood up from his chair, straightening his jacket. "I came here tonight hoping to show America that immigrants, people with accents, people who look different, can contribute something valuable to this country. Instead, you showed them exactly the kind of narrow-mindedness that holds people back." He paused, looking directly at Carson. "But you know what? That's okay. Because 5 years from now, I'll be a movie star, and you'll still be making the same tired jokes to the same audience every night." With that, Arnold extended his hand one more time. "It was an honor to be on your show, Johnny." This time, Carson took the handshake. His grip was firm, but his expression was one of genuine surprise and perhaps newfound respect. As Arnold walked off the stage, the audience erupted. It wasn't the polite applause of a typical Tonight Show guest exit. It was the kind of sustained, enthusiastic applause usually reserved for legendary performers or presidents. People were on their feet, cheering not just for Arnold's boldness, but for what he represented, the audacity to stand up for yourself when everyone expects you to stay down. Some audience members were crying. Others were shouting, "Yes!" The energy in the studio was unlike anything anyone had experienced during a Tonight Show taping. Carson sat behind his desk, still visibly shaken. His writers had prepared jokes for every scenario, but nobody had prepared him for this. The moment was too significant for the usual Tonight Show shtick. Carson, ever the professional, managed to recover enough composure to throw to a commercial break, but the damage was done. In the space of 5 minutes, Arnold Schwarzenegger had redefined how America saw him and how he saw himself. The aftermath of that appearance was immediate and dramatic. By the next morning, entertainment reporters were calling it one of the most memorable moments in Tonight Show history. The clip would be replayed on news programs for days and talked about in Hollywood circles for months. Phone calls started pouring into Arnold's agent's office before the show had even finished airing. Casting directors who had previously dismissed him suddenly wanted to meet with him. The man who had stood up to Johnny Carson clearly had more depth than anyone had realized. More importantly, Arnold's prediction proved eerily accurate. Within 5 years, he had indeed become a movie star. Conan the Barbarian was released in 1982, followed by The Terminator in 1984, transforming Arnold from a novelty act into one of Hollywood's biggest action heroes. The incident also marked a turning point in how immigrants and people with accents were portrayed in American media. Arnold had demonstrated that having an accent didn't mean you were stupid, and that being different could be a source of strength rather than shame.
Dean, standing nearby, heard the statement. He walked over to Brando and extended his hand. "Thank you," Dean said simply. Brando shook his hand. "Thank you for proving me wrong. The film is better because you were in it." The Young Lions became one of the most successful and critically acclaimed films of 1958. It earned multiple Oscar nominations and cemented its place as one of the great war films in cinema history. For Dean Martin, it changed everything. He'd proven he could do more than sing and make people laugh. He could act, really act, and hold his own against the greatest actors of his generation. After The Young Lions, Dean received offers for serious dramatic roles. He did some of them, like Rio Bravo with John Wayne, where he again proved his dramatic chops. But mostly he went back to doing what he loved: light comedies, variety shows, Vegas performances. Some people asked why. If he could do serious drama, why not do more of it? Dean's answer was pure Dean Martin. "I proved I could do it. That's enough for me. I'd rather spend my time doing things that are fun. Life's too short to be serious all the time." But he'd made his point. He'd silenced the doubters. He'd proven that the pretty boy pretender could stand toe-to-toe with Marlon Brando and Montgomery Clift and emerge not just unscathed, but triumphant. The story of Dean Martin and the Young Lions reminds us that people are rarely just one thing. The guy who sings "That's Amore" can also break your heart with a dramatic performance. The comedian can also make you cry. The person who makes everything look effortless might be working harder than anyone realizes. It reminds us not to underestimate people based on what we think we know about them. Marlon Brando, one of the smartest, most observant actors who ever lived, looked at Dean Martin and saw only a nightclub singer. He missed the depth, the pain, the life experience that Dean had been carrying all along. And most importantly, it reminds us that there's power in being underestimated. When people don't expect much from you, you have the freedom to surprise them. Dean Martin spent his entire career being underestimated, and he turned it into his greatest strength. He didn't need Marlon